Welcome to the Sharkpreneur podcast with Kevin Harrington and Seth Greene. Kevin Harrington is the inventor of the infomercial, one of the original sharks from the hit TV show Shark Tank, and has generated over $5 billion in TV and digital direct response sales. Seth Greene is the world's first trusted authority on cutting-edge direct response marketing, a best-selling author, and the only 3-time Marketer of the Year nominee. On the podcast, Kevin and Seth interview sharkpreneurs who share straight talk on what it takes to explode your business.
49 faces looked to him in triumph. Over the last 12 months, they had each taken turns and promoted his business for a week at a time, driving over $987,342 in revenue. What if you had a network of 50 centers of influence who promoted your business every week for a year? Grab your copy of the #1 Amazon best-selling book, The Ultimate Guide to Growing Your Business with a Podcast, at 33% off the Amazon price by going to ultimatepodcastbook.com. Again, that website for 33% off the Amazon price is ultimatepodcastbook.com. Welcome to the Sharkpreneur podcast. This is your co-host, Seth Greene. With me, as always, is the inventor of the infomercial and the original shark in the hit series Shark Tank, Kevin Harrington. Kevin, thanks for being here.
Hey, Seth, awesome to be here today. Thank you.
We are very excited for our special guest, Eric Edmeades. He is an entrepreneur with a diverse portfolio, ranging from everything from mobile computing to Hollywood special effects, contributing to iconic films like Avatar and the Pirates of the Caribbean. He's also made incredible strides in health and wellness. His revolutionary program, WILDFIT, has improved the lives of over 100,000 people in more than 130 countries. Eric, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Awesome. So tell us and our audience a little bit about what WILDFIT is and how it's affected so many people, and then we'll talk about all the other stuff you've got going on.
In the briefest way, WILDFIT was me solving my own health problems when nobody else would. And then I tried to help my friends and found out that willpower is not a good method for health recovery. You can give people the perfect rules and you can tell them exactly what to do, and they'll do them for about a week. And that frustrated me. And so I started diving into behavioral psychology. And about 10 years ago, I combined nutritional anthropology with behavioral psychology and designed a 90-day journey that has an 85% completion rate. And we've now reversed diabetes and solved weight loss problems. And it's just been a phenomenal adventure in my life that led to a couple of books and a medal from the Canadian government. And it was all a hobby. And it's one of my most exciting hobbies ever.
So Eric, Seth was saying you have 100,000 members. Are these subscribers? I'm trying to understand how you acquire a customer and then they're paying a monthly fee, or how does it work? What's the lifetime value?
It's a little bit complicated in the sense that when we first started the business, it really was a hobby. We were charging about $1,500. We would put people in classes of 8 because it spread the costs out, kept the cost down for them. And frankly, group coaching worked really effectively. Then what happened is that it started to word of mouth exploding, and we didn't have a lifetime value. It was just this one program that people did. And so when that happened, we launched a continuity membership program so people could keep going and learning more and what have you. But in the meantime, a big publisher picked up our program, Mindvalley. And so they suddenly, we went from 200 clients a year to 5,000 clients a year to now 150,000 plus all over the world. But of course, and you'll have a better awareness of this than most, when you work with a publisher, you get some really big advantages, right? Like, huge exposure, people stop me in airports. It's amazing, but you don't get client identities. And so it's like publishing a book in that way. And so that's been an interesting hill to climb up, is to build our own membership base and our own follower base. And I think we've done a pretty good job of that.
Awesome. What are you, you've got literally 150,000 people who have been through the program. Can you talk a little bit about your concept of evolutionary mismatch and kind of how it comes to life in WILDFIT?
The simplest way to put it is that we are living in arguably the very best times to have ever been alive. And look, I know there are people that are suffering. I'm not suggesting there isn't pain out there, but hot and cold running water, toilet paper, we live, antibiotics, anesthetics. We live in the best times that have ever existed for humans to be alive. And yet we have more pain, more suffering, more anxiety, more psychotropic drug prescription, more addiction, and more suicide than ever. And so one has to ask the question, how is it possible that in the best times ever, we have less happiness? And the answer to that is something called evolutionary mismatch, that we evolved a physiology and a psychology for a very different environment. And we've been elevated out of that environment into this new environment. And frankly, It's no different than if you take animals out of the zoo, or sorry, out of the wild and put them in the zoo. You would think you take an elephant from the Kruger National Park where it has to defend itself against lions and hyenas and poachers, and it doesn't have Medicare and it doesn't have regular food supply. You'd think you put it in the zoo, it would be safe. There's no lions, there's no poachers, but they die much more quickly in the zoo than they do in the wild. In fact, elephants in slavery in Thailand live longer than zoo elephants. And so closing the gap, as I talk about it in terms of evolutionary mismatches, identifying the pain and looking at the gap between our modern living and our ancestral past, and then combining that ancestral wisdom with modern technology to create a significantly better lifestyle.
Nice. Are you writing new books now, or what's the future? You had big success here. Mind Valley was awesome. That's a good start, but is there another plan for more?
Yeah, there are, and some things have gone really well and some things I'm learning about. I was approached by a publisher, Hay House, and they came to me looking for books, which I think is an honor, right? A lot of people have to write their plan, go get an agent, but they contacted me and we did a two book plus an option deal. They wanted to release the first book first. The first one they wanted to release is called Post-Diabetic. And this is because we were reversing so many cases of type 2 diabetes that a doctor from LA called me and he says, I don't understand this. I stopped off at Starbucks to get a coffee because I couldn't stay awake driving to my clinic. And I drank the coffee and still fell asleep behind the wheel of my car. 3 days later, I wrecked a rental car exactly the same way. And I'm 40 pounds overweight. I'm hypertensive. I'm a doctor. What the hell? And so he went through our program, lost 40 pounds, got off all his things, and approached me wanting to do a book at the same time as Hay House asked for it. So we put that book out, but we ran into some real serious marketing issues. Like Facebook didn't like the fact that we were talking about reversing diabetes without drugs. I don't know. They didn't like it very much. And so we ran into some marketing issues, but the book's done okay. We hit some #1 spots here and there. And then Hay House has another book. They're releasing the next one called The WILDFIT Way in September. And then after that, The Evolution Gap.
Very good. I did a book with Hay House, by the way, also. They're a good group.
Yeah, I like them.
Most of your insights revolve around that difference between the way we were, the ancestral life and modern life. What are some of the biggest mistakes people are making in their current eating habits that are not the way we were biologically wired for?
In my exploration of this, which starts with my great-grandfather finding the oldest Homo sapiens skull in history at that time, so it's not a new curiosity for me. I've now spent 15 years visiting and spending time with the Hadzabe people, one of the last hunter-gatherer tribes on Earth. And one of the best ways to answer your question is to say that the guide who's been taking me on about my third visit, he goes, Eric, why do you keep coming back? The scientists, they come once, they do their study and they're gone. And now that the odd tourist does come, they get their Instagram shot and they leave, but you keep coming back, you stay, you do embed it. Why? And I told him why. And years later, we were going back to do the trip again, and I was taking some guests with me. I was taking Paul Saladino from the Carnivore World, and I took some other people. And Gasper says to me, hey, you got to go and stop and visit my school. And I was like, every porter and every guide in Tanzania has a school, an orphanage. I visited, I've built schools there. I don't want to go. He goes, but look, there's a 4-hour gap in the calendar. We should go do it. So all right, you win. Went to his school. And it was the most beautiful school that I've ever seen in Tanzania for sure. Every other school that I visited, government-owned, private-owned, doesn't matter. The kids are unhealthy. Their eyes are leaking. They're yellow. They're anemic. They're just not his kids. His kids looked amazing. They were super engaged. They were charismatic. They were healthy. And I go, geez, Gasper, what are you doing differently? And he goes, you don't remember? I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, you don't remember? And I go, remember what? And he goes, the conversation we had about the fire about 7 years ago. He says, you said to me that we could learn from these people and that there are things that we're missing that we've been led astray by the food industry and what have you. And if we duplicated some of that, so these kids get meat, these kids get fruit, these kids get vegetable, because most of the kids in the school system there live on ugali, grain. They live on porridge. And he said, that's what's going on. And Seth, to answer your question, that microcosmic little story is what we're doing for everybody. But it's not just about food. It's about exercise. It's about the relationships, parenting, because so many of these areas have been twisted by modern civilization, technology, Disney, and the like, that we now need to bring consciousness to the table to make it better.
You also have an entire separate business helping speakers. Is that correct?
Yeah. I used to be terrified of public speaking. I was living in England at the time, and I'd first gotten passionate about health at that stage because I'd turned my health around so dramatically. Any more than 3 people in the room. And there came a point where I realized that my fear of public speaking was selfish, because I had ideas that could help get people out of pain. I'm going to avoid 15 minutes of shame where I could help you avoid 20 years of diabetes. Like that seems like an unfair exchange of fear, right? And so I started studying, and I did every course that I could find. I ended up touring with Tony Robbins for a year, where I was the only one allowed to follow him at those events while I was with him, because that's a tough slot to fill. So I really turned that around. And so one of the gifts I really enjoy giving people these days is the gift of being heard, becoming comfortable and competent at getting their message out into the world.
So one question for you, because you had massive growth when you worked through Mind Valley. They obviously take a nice percentage. Do you recommend people do similar things like that? Because you give up a big piece of your potential profit, right?
You know, Kevin, it's such a good question. And I don't think there's a pure answer. I think that, you know, on the one side, you could go sort of all in one way or the other. You go all in the one way, where I'm simply an author, I'm simply a creator, I'm simply a performer, and I just want to rely on a publisher to handle it, and I'm going to make royalties. And you can live quite well that way. I would say that we survived the pandemic because of that model. I mean, you can imagine we're running a live event training business, we're traveling around, the pandemic comes, we're basically done. But because we had these publication contracts and royalties, and everybody turned to digital and they went online, royalties went up while all other income went down. And so I think that can be really valuable, but it's also an all eggs in one basket solution to some degree. And it's not building brand equity. You know, that becomes a different thing. Like, we've had a number of people come and try and buy WILDFIT over the years, and the overall revenue and the overall brand image we have has one level of valuation. But when you recognize that a lot of that equity is in clients that we don't have identities for because they're with the publisher, it changes the model a little bit. And so the other version you could go is, well, I'm going to build the whole thing myself and build all the equity myself, but then that's slower. What we've tried to do is a mix of both. And I think for the most part, we made the right decision doing that.
Awesome.
You are, I think, the highest rated program, as you mentioned. You won a medal from the Canadian government. You worked with the U.S. Army. You've worked with Congress. The Evolutionary Gap book is coming out shortly, a survival guide for modern civilization. Where do you want to take this to?
Well, actually, this is a good one for you, Kevin. I like, it's all about solving problems and all about value add at the end of the day. And then we have the lead capture problem that I mentioned to you before. One of the things that I found out is that there's been a lot of study now on this area of evolutionary mismatch. While I was a very early thinker in this space, maybe even a leader in this space, the scientific community has caught on to it. And there was a big study done. And what they did is they developed an evaluation or an assessment that people go through to assess the level of evolutionary mismatch in their life. I went and read that study. I combined that study with the typical personal development wheel of life type study to create a holistic life evaluation. This is not goal setting. This is not the old Brian Tracy. And I love Brian, don't get me wrong. I just mean this is now science on top of that. And so we developed this evaluation. People go through 100 questions in 10 areas of life, and then it creates a phenomenal prescription for them about how to close the evolution mismatch. But here's the business side of it that gets really exciting. In each case, they not only get a natural prescription for what to do, but then the right technology partners are introduced to them, either because it's our own product in development, or it's because it's a white label, or because it's a joint venture we've done with somebody. So as an example, this would not be your problem, Kevin. I can tell by looking at your skin, you're doing just well on the vitamin D front here.
Yeah.
But let's say somebody does the test and it turns out that they live in Seattle or they live in London, right? So what'll happen is it'll give them a prescription about that when it recognizes the problem. And that prescription will have to do with vitamin D3 supplementation and sunlight. But then it will also turn to where to get that supplementation, which red light therapy they might want to get, given that they live in a place that the sun barely exists. And so each of those 100 categories lead to great business opportunities. And that's a big part of our project this year.
Nice. Awesome.
Where is the best place for our folks to go learn about, take that assessment? And then can you talk a little bit about your new podcast?
Absolutely. They can go to gapfinder.com. Gapfinder.com, they will do an evolutionary mismatch assessment. It will help them find their evolutionary gaps. And then, my new podcast, I'm loving it. It's called A Wilder Life. And what it really is about, it's about answering that question. How is it possible we're living in the best times ever and suffering more than ever? And how do we close those gaps? So I've got the best experts, rebels, scientists, from nutrition to erectile dysfunction, solving some of these gaps. Every conversation I've had so far has been fascinating for me. The way I look at podcasts, especially those longer form ones, is that they should be a really insightful, interesting conversation between two people that other people are lucky enough to hear. A Wilder Life is about helping people find the solutions to make this. We have that opportunity right now to have the best quality of life that's ever existed. But to do that, we need to understand some things about our ancestral history and the modern solutions that are available to us. And that's what the podcast is all about.
Fantastic.
Awesome. We will go tell everyone to check out gapfinder.com and then the Wilder Life podcast on every podcast platform. This has been Seth Greene for Sharkpreneur with Kevin Harrington and Eric Edmeades. Eric, thanks again for joining us.
Hey, cheers, guys. Thanks very much. It's been fun.
Cheers, Eric. Take care.
Thanks, everybody, for watching and listening. We will talk to you or see you next time.
Why do so many businesses struggle while others seem to explode overnight? Do you wish you had the secret to this type of exponential growth? Now, I've scaled more than 20 businesses to over $100 million, and it's not just luck. In my new book with Mark Tim, Mentor to Millions, you'll learn the repeatable framework I use in all my business ventures for massive success. Order at kevinmentor.com and get over $1,000 in bonuses. Head to kevinmentor.com.